So this video, I'm going to be doing a quick upgrade of a Action Army T10 short. I'm going to quickly talk about this first. The T10, great rifle, like solid. I like everything about them. They come with a plastic spring guide, a standard 7mm spring and a plastic piston. But it does come with a decent cylinder, which is pinned, not crimped. The cylinder head's fine. It's not the best, it's not the worst, it's fine, it does its job. It comes with a 50 round AA mag. Standard sort of brass in a barrel. This is a short version, so this takes a 303. Cylinder itself is fine, and the hop unit itself, to be fair, is okay as far as like the clamshell style goes. It's absolutely fine, but as with everything, it can be improved upon. But as a base, this is good because you are saving money. You don't have to switch some of this stuff out. I'm going to for this build because, again, this is a build I'm doing for someone. It's not one of mine. But realistically, you don't have to swap a lot of stuff out. Parts-wise, we're going to go with a Maple Leaf 602, I think these ones are. We're going to go for an Action Army VSR10 pop unit. We're going to go for one of my damper cylinder heads, some Action Army ball barrel spacers, 60-degree Flamingo, and we're going to start off with a Modify M150 spring, and I do have some of my FPS spacers, just to see how close we get to the sort of 2.2, 2.3 joule mark. We'll talk about this. This isn't going to be a short video. I'll probably split it into chapters. I'm not going to do loads of videos on the same thing, just because I did a recent VSR assignment video. So this is a fake mag that you can put tools in, and if you so desire, you can actually fit a VSR mag in there as well. We're not going to need that, so that can go to the side. Disassembly of this is exactly the same as every other VSR. So you're going to want to flip it over, and you're going to have front receiver, mid receiver, and rear trigger screw. These aren't that expensive for what you get. So as I said, you do get a 90-degree trigger. It's nothing fancy like some of the other 90-degree triggers out there, but it does its job. I've had them in the past. If you've watched any of my content, I've got a VSR10 sort of Delisle build, and I think that is using a standard T10 90-degree trigger. And it's been in there a while, and that thing's had a lot of rounds through it, and I've had no issues with it. I think the only thing that might go on them eventually is some of the springs, but that happens with the Action Army 90-degree S trigger anyway. And to be fair, any trigger that uses springs, that is a risk. Go ahead, undo these three. I tried something with the lighting on this video, so I'm hoping it's going to be a little bit clearer. But once these are undone, you can go ahead, separate that. Now, I quite like the T10 stock. You can get loads of stuff for these. So the cheek rest is adjustable. I think you can get pads to adjust the butt pad. You can get different trigger blades to go for the trigger, I believe. And then you've got all these rail sections along the side and the bottom. So you can get sort of M40A5 rails, or sort of like the TAC 41 uses now, the Mars sort of rails, to go up there, which is quite nice. And they work with the Action Army 50 rounders. The mag catch is a standard VSR style mag catch, so that's one thing you do have to be careful of, although it has got a nice little channel that it runs in, so when you are assembling and disassembling it, it doesn't tend to want to ping out as much, which is nice. The T10s can be made to be fairly quiet because of how the stocks are almost solid. There's very few cavities in here versus like a traditional VSR10 stock, but for the moment I'm just going to keep all this together and I'm going to put that to the side because we're not going to need it. And then again, this bit is pretty much a standard VSR. Very small Allen key here. So that is a very small screw, so do not lose that. And now, most VSRs have a secondary screw under there, which this one doesn't. So you can just go ahead and take the outer barrel off by unscrewing it. And these have got some simple little features that I like. So on the outer barrel, there's actually a very small O-ring on here. I don't know how well you'll see that. There's a very small O-ring that sits on here. So when this is fully closed, it's actually quite tight. You don't get the sort of wobble you'd expect off of a normal VSR. So I do like that, and the guide rings you get are fairly good. Although, as always, if you're doing a build yourself, measure and make your own guide rings if you've got a 3D printer, and extend them if you can, and make a sleeve for here. But that's some other bits I'll cover in another video. We'll deal with this in a minute. Firstly, we're going to put the spring, the piston, and the cylinder head set up in here. So because this has got a very weak spring in it, you can just pop the spring guide stopper out. When you've got a higher strength spring, that's a bit harder, but luckily this comes pretty much 0.8 joules, I think. So cylinders out, as I said, standard sort of VSR cylinder, but it is pinned rather than crimped by pinned. I mean these, which you can look at my other videos and you'll be able to see. And then you use some needle nose pliers or a cylinder tool if you've got one, and get that cylinder head off. So cylinder head's off, and then this is your standard polymer piston, very small 7mm spring covered in black grease, and then you've got your very, very flimsy spring guide in there. Again, this is made for a 1 joule market, so you are always pretty much going to get plastic stuff. Just because I do not like grease in cylinders, I think it collects debris and just fouls up the system. I prefer cleaning it all out and only using a little bit of grease on the spring guide. But generally I'll use dry PTFE or silicone oil. So spring, piston, spring guide, etc. is all very, very easy. As I said, we're going with a W.A.S.P. These are TM spec cylinders, so any standard piston is going to fit just fine. So spring guide, assume I've put grease on this. I normally would, but I don't know where it is. I've moved it because I was doing something with it the other day. But W.A.S.P. uses 13mm springs, which are what I recommend for most VSR builds. So you can go ahead, shove that in, and then piston wise, I'll go ahead and assemble this. Obviously you don't have to use a W.A.S.P. This is just what I'm using for my builds. Obviously because I make them, so it makes sense for me too. Right, and then as per the install video, we're going to take some silicone oil. I use Abbey's good, and Halfords do an all-weather silicone oil lube, which is good. But you're going to want to go ahead, put that around the cup, blare it out. Then you're going to take your cylinder head, get a bit of silicone oil, and again, just on the O-ring for the cylinder head, you just want to put a little dab on there. Go ahead and assemble that, which is hard because you're going to have slippery fingers now. So that was a bit harder than usual. There's just a tiny bit of fouling on the first few threads on the cylinder. Absolute rarity. First time I've had that happen. But now we can hold the trigger, line this up with the cut in the bottom, and seat that home. Make sure if your guide ring falls out, you put it back in, because that will, believe it or not, cause slam firing or not to cock. Next, you're going to want to put your spring guide stopper in, and that should click in once. Then you should be able to push it in a second time, like so. So it does go in all the way. I don't know how well you can see that. It will click once and it will sit flush here. That doesn't mean it's in. And the amount of times I've seen people with a rifle, they're having an issue, specifically with the T10 and even the Laylax trigger. If this doesn't click in fully, after a few shots, it will drop and it will sit against the trigger guard. So you won't see it, but you won't be able to cock it. So as you can see, we've got a full seal. So thumb over the nozzle, pull the trigger. And so that's that bit done. If you've got any, I haven't got any to hand, but if you've got any WD-40 dry PTFE spray, that's what I use on the outside of the cylinders rather than oil or anything, so dry PTFE spray. But that's done. Didn't need to change the trigger, it's 90 degree. We've just swapped out the spring guide, piston and cylinder head. We can put all that to the side. Obviously, if you are using a weighted piston like the W.A.S.P, you can change the weights and brakes to see what works best with your setup, because every single component changes how it works, whether it's the bore of the barrel, the length of the barrel, the cylinder head you're using, it all changes. So I always say experiment. The hop up. 2 small Allen keys in there, smaller than you. So you're going to want to go ahead and undo those. If you keep it up like that, you'll keep both the screws in there rather than falling out. So put that to the side. Then on the hop adjuster, there's a teeny small Phillips screw. So you're going to want to take that out. Obviously in this case, we're not using this hop unit, but as I mentioned at the start of the video, as far as hop units go, this Action Army clam style unit is actually not too bad. It comes with a concave arm and the adjustment and everything's fine on it. So there's the adjuster arm with your small screw, and then slide that out. Notice how the QC on these is a bit better than the Simers. I didn't have to worry about any kind of burrs or anything. And if you're wondering what I mean by that, if you watch the Simer video, you'll see the small issue I had. Pretty standard setup you'd see out of any TMG spec. The difference with this one is everything about it just seems to be a little bit better quality than a standard sort of clone VSR hop unit. The screws are a bit of a quality. This plastic is a much more solid plastic, a lot less wobble, and the hop arm, which I'll show you in a second, is concave. So I'm not going to take the whole hop unit apart because we're not using anything out of it, but I just want to show you the hop arm, because this is usable. you can get away with using a Flamingo, a maple leaf, modify, etc. because of the concave shape of the arm. It does work. The seal will vary, as it does with sort of clam style units. There is always potential for it to leak out the nozzle. There's the hop arm, and I don't know how well you're going to see that, but that is actually a concave shape rather than the little prongs that you would get on a standard VSR that's sort of just that shape. This is a long concave patch, probably about 5mm long with a couple mil radius on the patch. So as far as a hop unit goes, it's okay. You're paying, if you're not upgrading this all straight away, you can leave this part till last. Like, it does its job, it is fine. Just swap the bucking out if you're on a low budget. And if you are upgrading, you've got alternatives out there. With Action Army's chamber, you've got TTI, Drill's TDC. You've got options. Not Airsoft Pro, personally, not a fan. I like some of their stuff, but the hop unit for the VSR is a very odd design that I'm not a huge fan of. Nice positive clicks on this chamber as well. As I said, everything about it is Action Army have done a good job. For a standard style chamber, it ain't bad. But we've done enough talking about that. We're going to talk about, not that we need to spend a huge amount of time because I've already spoken about this at length on another video. But we've got an Action Army chamber. So the nub that comes with the A chamber is a standard sort of cylindrical nub. It's crap. You're not going to use it. You get a load of screws in here. Again, I don't know how well the camera's going to show them. And a spring, a plate, and the nub. So the nub goes away. These two longer screws, they are going to be used in the sides of the hop unit, and they go through this. And the short one goes in the bottom hole. But you'll see what I mean when I put that all together. We're going to take the Flamingo. Maple leaf barrel has a nice big cut on it, which works well with the Flamingo. And again, other buckins, I'm not just going to push my own stuff. There are other companies out there like Maple Leaf and Modify who do make good buckins, and they would work well on this style of hop window. So Flamingo goes on, quick look through, make sure that's lined up. And then you're just going to want to go ahead and line this up and slide it in. So there's a tab here and a cut out there. So that just slides in together. Just go ahead and push that home. Make sure it's all aligned okay. And what I like to do is just use an Allen key or something just to push down on the patch to make sure it's coming through centered, which it is. Then you take this sleeve, which has got two holes on it. These holes line up with the holes on the side of the chamber. So you go ahead, slide that over, and line those holes up. Then you're going to want to take these longer screws and put one in each side. So don't snug them down at this point, just get them so they're sort of touching. If Action Army watch my videos, which they very well may do, stop using these screws. Use nylon tipped, because if you do these up too much, or people do these up too much, it literally destroys their inner barrel. So use the same size M3 screw, but just go for a nylon tip. It will save many customers their barrels. When I'm building these for myself, in fairness, I use my own stuff. I don't use this chamber, but when I used to use these chambers, or any chamber, even the silverbacks, I've binned these grub screws off and used the nylon tipped, because otherwise you are just asking for trouble. And this teeny tiny screw, the smallest one, goes on the underside here, because that's also where the hop block screw is going to go when you reassemble it all. And then once you're sure all of these are lined up, which you can test by see if you can twist this. Once they're all lined up, just give them a gentle twist. Do not wrench them down because you can damage your barrel. So that should be fine. The next stage, and my way of doing this is I like to have the hop unit like this, so facing up. I put the spring in, make sure I've got the nub in my hand first. Nub wise, I've just got a maple leaf for this particular build, but any of the Omega nubs, whether it's the old style rubber ones or whether it's the new silicone ones or even some of the TNT nubs are all fine. Or Thingiverse, you can get the original long concave nub from Skis rather than any of the other copycats out there. I would recommend the Ski nub. But you put your nub on, put your spring in, then rather than trying to fold the arm into the chamber, fold the chamber down onto the arm, then turn it over. And then you've got this little plate which sits on, I can't remember which size, but then there's another Allen key you have to go up through the bottom. That is how you adjust it. So with that now in place, straight through here, see that small opening there, that is where you adjust the hop. So at this stage, before you assemble the whole rifle, apply some hop, look down the barrel, see how it's coming through. Again, I haven't been asked to TDC this one, so I won't, but that looks like it's coming through perfectly. Next is barrel spacers. Either 3D print your own, or you can get some of these Action Army ball spacers. I would put some tape behind them when you install them, just to stop them from sliding around. I haven't got any tape, so I'm just going to put this together just to show you how it goes together. But when you're building this, you're going to put some tape here, some tape here, because you don't care if these slide that way when you're taking it out, but what you don't want to happen is for them all to just bunch up here when you're assembling it. So you would put tape here and here. So that was a Maple Leaf standalone mega nub that I used there. Then you can go ahead, if you need to, you can put silicone oil on these O-rings, which, you know what, I've already got it out, so I will. Go ahead and slide these in. Mine are probably all going to bunch because I haven't put tape there. Yeah, which they are. So yeah, tape it normally. And then what's useful is the tube that your inner barrel likely came in is great to push this down. So I'm just going to move my spacers down and use this tube. Put this spacer down. And then you want to line this hole up with that cut out there, which can be easier said than done. Like so, there and there. We're going to take our hot block, again make sure these are lined up. Hot block goes on, do these 2 Allen screws up. So do the rear one up reasonably tight so it catches, then do the front one so that catches, and then alternate between the two until they're nice and snug. If you wrench one down more than the other, sometimes what will happen is it will pull it away from the body and it will rattle, which this doesn't. If this is rattling, and this hot block's moving, one of two things has happened. You've done one of these up too tight, and it's pulling it at an angle. So if you do this one up too tight, it'll pull the rear up. If you do the back, it'll pull the front up. Or that very small screw we spoke about, if you've used the wrong size screw, or you haven't done it in enough, this screw will bottom out when it hits it, and then this will be loose. So that's what you want to avoid, but this is solid, so we're good to go. Next up is a case of just assembling it, making sure you've got your guide ring in there. That's a rookie mistake, we've all done it. Go ahead, slide all that together. Where this hot block stops will vary by build, but if it bottoms out there, just back it out and you should see, so in this little hole, you're not going to be able to see it on camera, but there's a hole on this and there's a hole on the receiver. So when these are perfectly lined up, that little screw that we took out earlier, this guy, he will go through both of the holes. If you put this screw in and you're feeling resistance, then your outer barrel is not lined up to your receiver and you're going to destroy the thread. It's not a screw, is it? It's a little Allen key. So this should go in nice and easy, which means they're lined up and it should be able to sit flush. That's the key. If the screw doesn't sit flush, I felt resistance there, so I'm just twisting the outer barrel just to make sure I'm getting it in that hole. There we go, no resistance, and I'm able to get it to screw. So that screw should be flush. And now there should be very, very minimal wobble between these two. And then to test seal, make sure this is not loaded. Cock it and cover the end of the barrel, which I'll do with my thumb. And then we have seal. And you can go ahead and assemble it all back together. And that is how easy it is, say to upgrade, to put parts in a T10. Power-wise, I might do an Instagram on that and check that. The results are going to vary on what you're building, so I generally don't like showing results because not every spring's the same, not every barrel is going to be the same. So yeah, consistent. This is massively overpowered on an M150 with the W.A.S.P setup. This is on 4.8, so this is a 3 joule. So I'm probably going to have to drop it down to an M130. But usually a modify or a 13mm M150 spring in a build like this will roughly get you between 2 to 3 joules, usually with hop set on a 4.8. That will vary. You could get another M150 and get a different result. Generally speaking, that's the parts you're going to use or something similar. And you haven't had to change the trigger, you haven't had to change the cylinder, just changed piston, spring guide, spring cylinder head, bucking, barrel and a chamber. And you don't need to do anything else to that. You could go for a different barrel and you could go for a different chamber and bucking, etc. But they're the main components that you're going to be checking out. If you have any issues with air seal, always start at this end because it could be the piston, it could be the cylinder head, it could be the O-rings, and more often than not, it's the lubricant that you've used. Sealing in an AA chamber is generally pretty easy. Don't have any problems with that. But if there is ever any leaking, it's usually the bucking's not been pushed in enough and the nozzle isn't seating properly. But otherwise, guys, that's it. If you've got any questions about it, just leave a comment. And as always, like and subscribe and all that goodness, because it does keep me motivated to make these videos. I think I'm going to do some more content on the MWS next. But for now, guys, that is a very quick T10 build. I hope you've enjoyed it. And as always, Thanks very much for watching, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye bye.